everyone, and welcome back to In the Grove. My name is Brooke Jurczyk, and I'm here with Elk Grove High School multimedia student Gabe Newman. How are you doing today, Gabe?
I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
So, as many of you may know, Gabe is a senior at Elk Grove High School that has been working with EGTV as the play-by-play and color commentator for boys basketball, football, and other sports. What some of you may not know is that Gabe has been making a podcast of his own and is a video editor at Elk Grove High School. He is also working with other places outside of Elk Grove High School, or Elk Grove, to film live streams for basketball and even hockey. Today I will be learning more about these experiences. So to start off, what has gotten you interested in being the play-by-play and color commentator for these events?
So I've always been a really big sports guy. I grew up watching sports. My dad got me into watching football, baseball. I mean, it's one of those things where I've always loved sports, but I'm never good enough to play. I started playing football, and I was terrible. I was a sideline pacer because you can't really call them bench warmers because they wouldn't let us sit on the bench. But then I switched to baseball, and then I still play baseball, but I'm not the best. So when in my junior year, when I joined the EG multimedia class and found out that we'd be doing broadcasts, that was like, that was my biggest opportunity to really dive into what I wanted to do, because I wasn't still quite sure if I knew I wanted to work somewhere in sports. I didn't know if I wanted to be a coach or something to do with media, a beat writer. But when I did my first broadcast, I fell in love with it, and ever since then, I've made a list of idols that I have in when it comes to sportscasting. You know, Al Michaels, John Madden, Jason Benetti too. I mean, the White Sox current play-by-play guy. Those are all guys that I look up to, and I try to model my commentary style after. But without them, I wouldn't have fallen in love with it. So it's a combination of both the EG multimedia class and also just me growing up around sports.
Yeah, and that's amazing how it's like you've had it since you were little and everything. So I assume these sessions have given you a lot of experience and everything. So what was the most informational session of play-by-play or color commentating that you've done so far?
So I mostly do play-by-play. Occasionally I do color, but it's tough to pick just one event that I've gotten a lot of experience from, because there's been you get more experience on the events that you do, and so you just try every broadcast I do. I try and pick one thing to improve. So like recently, I've noticed that I'm very repetitive when it comes to commentating basketball. I'm very repetitive when someone scores. So I'll be like, this player scores or this player puts the ball in. So I saw pretty much a commentator that I follow on TikTok that has a note sheet, and it's just different ways to say the same thing, different ways to say that a player scored a basket. And so in the next basketball game I do, and that probably won't be for a while because the basketball season is pretty much over. I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna try and have a note sheet and try and vary up my style. So it's mostly about just taking one thing and improving it every single time. The first broadcast I've done, which was September of 2021 to now, night and day. I mean, and there's a couple reasons for that. Mostly, number one, I've gotten more familiar with the sports that I've commentated. So soccer especially was one that was my first ever broadcast, and I'd really only been a soccer fan for maybe a year and a half. But I watch games and pick up on some of the things that the commentary says, and also apply it to different sports. Like football, I mean, I've been watching football for 6 years plus, but now when I watch football, I pretty much can only hear what the announcer's saying, and I just try and pick up on it. It really allows me to not only watch more sports, but learn new things from just a mundane NFL game or something like that.
Yeah, and I assume that's given you a lot more experience in other sports, as you said, with volleyball that you've never done before. And some people know your basketball commentary. One of your most notable play-by-play sports interviews for basketball was on December 2nd, 2022, for Elk Grove boys basketball versus Wheeling. The score was 66-63 with Elk Grove winning. They broke their 60-game losing streak in conference play.
One more to put the Grens up 3. He got it!
No fouls.
With 10 seconds to go.
Patrol the three-point line, no fouls.
Hutchinson puts up a 3. No good. Rebound Marchetti. Marchetti puts up the 3. No good. Brunson puts it up. And that is game. For the first time since February 29th, 2016, the 60-game losing streak is over.
What a
How do you think they pulled off this win?
So, like you mentioned, they had a 60-game in-conference losing streak going into Wheeling. Wheeling is always the team that, especially when it comes to sports like football and basketball, Elk Grove feel that Wheeling is their most winnable conference game. And they've had some close games against Wheeling in the past, but this one felt a little different. It was the two teams are so similar. Elk Grove has a star point guard in Bronson Bartuch. Wheeling has a star point guard in R.J. Gamble, and they both don't have very what's the word I'm looking for? They both don't have very obnoxious size, right? So it's more just about who wants it more when it comes to games against Wheeling and EG, and they split this year. But the first game, which what you were talking about on December 2nd, that was one where Elk Grove, you could tell they wanted it. They wanted to arrest the 60-game slide, and they did just that. They held on for most of the game. Wheeling fought back in the beginning of the fourth quarter, took a lead, and then it was just back and forth from there. And it's the beauty of sports. I mean, close games where, they're two teams that probably won't be competing for a state title anytime soon, but they had their own interests in mind, and so that turned into a really good game with Elk Grove coming out on top, and it's one of my biggest achievements getting to call that game, but also one of my biggest embarrassments too, because I had probably one of the most embarrassing voice cracks at the end of it. But that's something I've worked on as well, is trying to eliminate those voice cracks. But yeah, they're two very evenly matched teams, and it shows in how they both split again in two really close games against each other. And yeah, it was just a great game to commentate.
Yeah, and it's amazing that they got kind of confident because they saw that each of the teams were kind of even, and they actually had a chance because the teams weren't too big, and and instead they really pushed forward. So another more notable game is the football one, the one for the playoffs. Even though EG was trailing most of the first half of the game, they held their own in the third quarter and took 1 point with a score of 22-21 in the fourth quarter. Though they couldn't hold Hoffman Estates out in the end zone, and they lost 29-22.
And I'm surprised this is the first defender that's had some issues with it, because it's a really confusing play for the defender.
I'm surprised that's not a false start. As Elsner, he's in, touchdown Grenadiers, much needed. Jacob Elsner punches it in, and the Grenadiers have their first points in the playoffs.
Go some fireworks. That's my guy, Jacob. Glad to see he's getting some calls. He'll get some ink in the paper too.
story of 2 fumbles in this game so far. It was.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'll just take the points when we get them, and we'll throw the defense out there if we can.
Jurczyk under pressure, floating one up,
open.
and he's got it. Touchdown, Grenadiers! Garrett Ewan, unbelievable! First lead.
Yeah, so that was the first playoff game in EG, I believe, since 2011. That was the first time they'd hosted a playoff game, and first time they'd even been in the playoffs since 2013. With a coaching staff, the staff is experienced outside of a couple younger coaches, but the players, of course, were very inexperienced when it came to playing playoff football. One of the biggest things about football and playoff football especially is momentum. And Elk Grove, it seemed like off a kickoff, they had the momentum until they were on the goal line and Mitchell Jurczyk, the quarterback, tried to pitch it back to Jacob Elsner, the running back, and it didn't work out. They fumbled the ball. Hoffman recovered, and ever since then, from, I'd say, midway through the first quarter till pretty much the third quarter, I'd say with 2 minutes to go in the third quarter, but that fourth quarter, Hoffman had all the momentum, and it showed in the score, but EG's defense kept them in it, and finally the offense was able to move the ball closer to the fourth quarter, and Mitchell Jurczyk threw up a prayer to Garrett Ewan in the side of the end zone. He came down with it, and like you said, they took that 1-point lead. They tried going for 2, didn't get it. And then Hoffman are a great team, and Elk Grove beat them earlier in the season, in the regular season, and that was a defensive battle. They pretty much won the game off of a pick 6 by Kachi Ogwu. But Hoffman are a great team, and they had a slow start to the season. They were a playoff team the season prior, had a slow start, picked it up, so they had a lot of momentum going into the game, and it really showed as they marched their offense down the field, scored, and then brought the defense out, and they were able to stop the Grenadiers. So it wasn't it was a very pleasurable experience. I'm sure a lot of students, staff, faculty enjoyed having a playoff game to look forward to. It didn't work out in the Grenadiers' favor, but it made some lasting memories with myself, I know, and a bunch of other people as well. And that game, despite Elk Grove losing, is going to go down as one of my best memories in my 4 years at Elk Grove High School.
It's amazing. And yeah, they just could not push Hoffman back at the end. So, but I saw through your website that you've commented on other sports, not only football, basketball, and the other ones. You also commented on hockey. So how was that experience? Yeah,
so there's a really long chain of events that led to me getting the opportunity to commentate hockey. I commentated the Elk Grove football game against Rolling Meadows. It was at Rolling Meadows, and they have a student there. I couldn't believe he was a student because he was so talented, Russell Matthews, who has all his own equipment. He does prep games, which is the hockey team that includes Palatine, Rolling Meadows, Elk Grove, and Prospect. It's mostly Prospect kids. But yeah, so he has a website where he has pretty much all of these games that he's planning on covering, and he told me after the game to reach out to him if I was ever interested in doing a hockey game or anything else that was on the calendar. So I figured, why not? It's something new. I knew it would be a big challenge for me because as Al Michaels said, he's one of my biggest inspirations, and he's the only person to have done all 4 major American sports, so hockey, basketball, football, baseball. He said hockey is the toughest sport that he's commentated out of those 4 because it just moves so fast, and it's so constantly fast. You look down at your roster for a second to get an aim, and there's a shot on goal on the other end. It's crazy how fast it gets. So I struggled a little bit. in the first period and a half, but by the time I was getting to the third period, I was starting to feel it a little bit more, and it's just one of those things where I just need a little bit more experience. But it's hockey is definitely a sport that I want to pursue farther. It's a great sport, and in terms of commentating it, I hope either in college or hopefully one day I get signed to a major broadcasting company that does hockey, and I'll be able to pursue that sport as well as others down the road.
Yeah, and now you can basically expand your horizons with whatever sports you want to do. And from what it sounded like, it was pretty difficult. And watching the sport, it's very quick. You could just look away for a second and they would score a goal or something. So, but though another thing that many of our viewers may not know is your school life. So you are currently in the multimedia class, as said from the beginning, and on top of commenting on sports live streams, you are also video editing both via your Vimeo accounts and making sports podcasts. So first, with the video editing, so what exactly are you editing, and what are the topics in the videos?
Yeah, so our multimedia class has a videography group, I guess you could call them, called GrenBC, which is a play on NBC, where it's changed a lot from last year. But last year were the videos that I edited, and basically we would have different segments. So we had this kid who graduated last year, funniest kid around. Like he's so quick-witted, and his name is Luca. So we did a segment called Luca on the Street, where the first episode was kind of just him being Luca, and then the second episode we kind of gave him like different things to play at, like we dressed him up in a Santa costume because for some reason we have a Santa costume that we never use. So we put it to use, and we basically went around the school talking to kids who were either in gym or teaching class or just basically anyone who wanted to talk to us, and so that was one of the segments. We also basically we tried to do a bunch of doable segments that you would find on YouTube or TikTok or any of the trendy segments. Like for one of the segments we had, you put headphones on and then tried to read the person behind the camera's lips. I mean, it was really fun. We had like 2 to 3 segments per video, and they were like 15-minute videos. I think we released like 5 or 6 of them, and it was a great challenge for me to I was still trying to learn Adobe Premiere Pro at that point, and editing those videos was a great way for me to learn that editing software. This year, I've taken kind of more of a backseat role of GrenBC. I'm still involved sometimes with what they're doing, but we have a few more people in the group now, and the content has kind of changed a little bit. It's shorter form content, and I'm more focused on the podcast.
So I'm sure that you will be accepted into your top colleges and obtain your dream job because of all of your experiences. So I've also heard that on top of all of your experiences, you've made a podcast titled, I believe, the Grenadier Sidelines, under the account The Grenadier Network on Spotify. Can you tell me more about what you're doing in the podcast?
Yeah, so the podcast is called Grenadier Sidelines, and it's kind of confusing because when people ask where I can find the podcast, they search up Grenadier Sidelines, they can't find anything. You got to search up the Grenadier Network. That's the multimedia umbrella, if you like to call it, of all the podcasts. My podcast is on there, including some other podcasts as well. But that podcast pretty much came to fruition last year in the spring when Mr. Mo, our multimedia teacher, asked. He met with all of us individually and asked us what our plans are for the next year. And I suggested, is it possible that we can get a radio frequency so that I could talk about, for example, a football game after it happens, like, breaking down of a football game and exactly like what they do on 670. They have, Bears Mondays and stuff like that. And he said that probably wouldn't be in the conversation, but that I could always start a podcast. And so I did exactly that. My first podcast episode was released the second week of school, and it was me interviewing Coach Osei, the football coach, just about the team ahead. I pretty much previewed the football season. That was my first episode. And then the second episode, I kind of based the podcast off the football season. And then, obviously, our boys' soccer team did really well. They won the MSL East. So I built it off the foundation of the football season and kind of spurred other sports into it. And then it was, at first, the first couple episodes, I was thinking I'll probably only wind up doing this for the basketball or for the football season. But once I got to like episode 7, 8, I was like, I could really take this somewhere. So I finished up the football season, and then I thought, do I know enough about the sport of basketball to be able to talk about it for both girls and boys? And I said yes. I could be able to talk about, with all the winter sports and all of the commotion that happens, I could be able to talk about that every week, and I did. It helped that pretty much the first time I covered basketball was when Elk Grove boys made that 60-game, got that win after a 60-game losing streak. That helped, and then ever since then, I kind of took a break over the winter holiday, came back, recapped everything, and then ever since then, it seems like there's something crazy that happens every week, and it kind of makes it easy for me to talk about. But yeah, I'm on episodes 23 and 24. I'm releasing at the same time. 23 is me talking about Coach Osei leaving. He's leaving Elk Grove, going to Kankakee, and on top of previewing the boys basketball playoffs, which by the time this will go out, they're already done. And then 24 is kind of a part 2 where I interview, have an exclusive interview with our athletic director, Kirk McNider, and pretty much just ask him about all the turnover in coaches, because we've had a new boys, we have to find a new boys football coach. We've already found a new boys soccer coach, as Alex Stavropoulos said that he was stepping down. Daniel Klaus is filling his shoes, but there's also, new boys tennis. Boys and girls lacrosse have new coaches. And so we talked pretty much about all the turnover in coaches, the spring sports, and recapping the winter season. It was a 35-minute long interview. And so that's its own podcast episode, because it's, in my opinion, an exclusive interview with an athletic director of a school is premier content, and it deserves its own podcast episode. And then it's pretty much a part 2 to the last one, but it's a different, it's episode 24, because you don't really have to see episode 23 to know what happens in episode 24. I could have made the podcast an hour long, but I don't think they would have let me post it. But yeah, so I every week I try, just like with commentary, I try and improve one thing on the podcast, and my first episode to my 24th episode, or 23rd, because 24th is kind of different. First episode to 23rd episode, night and day. The improvement I've made between then and now, and I just hope to keep it going. I play baseball, which is going to throw a wrench into things, because I can't talk about baseball if I'm on the team to avoid bias. So I'm going to have one of my friends kind of be a co-host for the basketball segment, or for the baseball segment, and yeah. So there's one season left, and with me being a senior, it kind of makes things a little iffy on exactly how I'm going to end the season and the podcast, because I can't do one next year because I'm not going to be here. But I mean, it's going to be interesting to see just exactly what I do to kind of either recap everything that happened or just how I end this season of Grenadier Sidelines.
And I assume, like, with interviewing the coaches and everything, you're also getting some insight into the next games, and just in general, you can also get a recap of your previous games and also improve, as you earlier stated.
Chris Gonzalez territory corners, but with him playing striker, we'll have to see. I can't quite tell who that is. It's a right-footed player.
Johnny Monjaras taking the corner for the Grenadiers. Puts it in
Monjaras
the
is
box.
in swinger toward the net.
Goal!
And they scored! It's Chris Gonzalez who gets his head to it. It's a beautiful corner, and the Grenadiers have their first lead in this game. And what will that do to the MSL East title? Is what separates Elk Grove
From
and a conference championship. The in-swinger from Barrington. Toward net. Can the Grenadiers get to it first? It's shot. It's what? It's a goal kick! And that is over! Your Elk Grove Grenadiers are MSL East champions! It is over! What a team! What a season!
What a win!
I wish the best of luck to you in your college search and in your future job. And thank you so much for being on this program.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor to do something like this. It's a beautiful studio, and it's a real pleasure to get to kind of share what I do, because I want someone to fill my shoes for the next 4 years after I graduate high school.
And to our viewers, please be sure to check out Gabe's Spotify podcast at the Grenadier Network. That is where there are some videos titled The Grenadier Sidelines that Gabe has commented on. I'm sure they'll be as good as his commentary for the sports live streams. If you would like to learn more about Gabe's experiences, you can visit his website at gabenewman.weebly.com. I'm Brooke Jurczyk, and I will see you all in the Grove.